Hello, everyone, and welcome to the session so that we can enhance our knowledge of culturally responsive supports for juvenile healing to wellness participants. Just want to thank you all for being here. As Laura mentioned, you are able to use the chat box. We encourage you all to introduce yourselves there. And with that, I'll go ahead and start with our introductions. I am Wichita Kylan Caddo from Oklahoma, and as she mentioned, I am the Assistant Director of the Tribal Youth Resource Center. I'll be facilitating today, and it is my pleasure to welcome Chanel and Grandma Shar here with us. As you can see, Chanel is the coordinator of the Blackfeet Tribal Healing to Wellness Supports Project, really instrumental in leading this work forward in her community. She also holds a bachelor's of social work. And then Charlene Burns, who I affectionately called Grandma Shar, is Chanel's grandmother, also a cultural advisor, Blackfeet Tribal Healing to Wellness Support Project. She, along with her husband, have dedicated 30 years to establishing and maintaining the culture within their community and passing that on to the next generations. But for right now, I'll pause and let them give a further introduction. Welcome, ladies.
Thank you, Tasha. Oki, Nastu, Natanaku, Matoyik, Sina. Hello, everyone. My name is Chanel Grant. My Blackfeet name is Grass Snake, and I'm the coordinator of the Blackfeet Juvenile and Adult Healing to Wellness Court projects. I'm very honored to be here today and honored that we were asked to share our journey of developing this cultural component with you all. And I hope that by sharing our journey, you guys are able to maybe start more cultural integration into your programming. And so now it's my pleasure to introduce my co-presenter, my Nasa, my grandmother, Charlene Burns.
Good morning. I'm so honored to be here today, and thank you for inviting me to be a part of this presentation, Chanel. Like she said, I'm Chanel's grandmother, and I'm also a cultural grandmother or a cultural elder, which means that I've done the work in the study to have elders teach us the sacred things and wellness for our people. And so with that, I'd like to be able to share a prayer this morning. And I'd like to give some positive energy for everything that's everybody is attempting to do. I've been an advisor for Chanel in the Healing to Wellness Court since the beginning. And it's really taken on a good road, and it's going in a good direction. Our people are beginning to understand wellness in a good way. So with that, I want to call in our ancestors and those helpers that will help continue to help us move in a good direction, and for all of you that are attempting the same thing. My name is Ibikit Stakiaki, which means far offering woman. Okay. Hayo napinatusi, hayo it's badapio. Hayo gipitaki sakumidapi koko mekisum, ibit suwatsi, spumukinan. Hayo sakoiga katusa queenaman, nidanskatstamo. Spumukinan, spumukit, amskapi bikani. Nidanskatstamo, gimo bad beats, and calling on you to help our people, and calling on you to help all those people that are wanting to help in their communities. I'm asking you to come and help us to speak good words, good positive energies, to uplift one another, to help each other, to restore ourselves, to our families, to our communities. Nistawatsamani gamodani oxadabitsan. Hey.
Thank you so much, Grandma Shar, for opening us up in a good way and that's something that we always like to do at the Tribal Youth Resource Center, and the work that we're doing today to uplift the children. Really appropriate that you called on the ancestors to look at the work that we're all doing, and just very appreciative of your thoughts, your intentions, and your words. One thing that you mentioned in your lead-in was that you've done the work and the study of our sacred ways to be able to provide this service to your community and then to us as the greater community of Indigenous people. And I think that's important to the conversation we're about to have, is that it does take work because of colonization and all of the things that we've done, that we have to put in the work just like we would with Western education to learn our ways, and so that we can pass those on to the next generation. So again, thank you. Chanel, I don't know if you wanted to add anything else or if you all wanted to describe this picture to the group at all.
Grandma, if you want to kind of explain why we chose this photo.
So this photo is very significant to us because it's in the prayer that I said Gamotani, which means that our way of thinking as Indigenous people will survive and go on. And in order to do, it's one of our sources of strength and continuity and why those things still exist. In this picture, it shows the little baby in the middle, and putting our children in the center of our world was our major source of strength and wellness, because we transferred all of our wellness methodologies beginning at a very young age, like this, beginning with their Indian name was their first sacred transfer. And so all throughout their lifetime, we imparted connections to these little children.
Thank you for sharing that explanation, and I think we'll get into more of how keeping our children at the center of everything that we do and really prioritizing them and modeling. I know in our prep for this session, we talked a lot about a lot of different things, and so I'm excited to share that with the group. But thank you for giving that description of the picture. So we'll go ahead and get started unless either of you had anything else you wanted to add right now.
Nope, I think we can get started.
Okay, great. So as you'll see here, we're just going to do a quick key component review for Healing to Wellness Courts. I know that many of you work in Healing to Wellness Courts, so this is not new information, but we have relatives from all over at different stages in developing their Healing to Wellness Courts. So we did want to do a quick overview. And so we'll just go around this circle here. As you see, there's a circle, and very apropos again that we use a circular model in Indigenous ways of thinking and knowing and applying information. But in the beginning, when we're looking at Healing to Wellness Courts, we do want to start with team, community, and nation building, and really envisioning what that looks like in planning for our Healing to Wellness Courts. And we're looking at how these young people enter in the circle of the Healing to Wellness Court. Are they eligible? What types of healing and treatment are we going to provide that are specific to our communities? And I think that this session will enhance how we look at that, really incorporating the cultural components. And I would argue not only incorporating and adapting, those are words we hear a lot, but really having a cultural foundation to what we're doing to build these juvenile Healing to Wellness Courts, so that they have that solid foundation, that we're not just doing some cookie cutting from a Western model, but really creating our own models within our communities. Support and supervision. So how are we putting the children at the center once they're in the Healing to Wellness Court? How are we supporting them and supervising them in a way that doesn't dehumanize them and helps uplift and build them as human beings? Discipline and encouragement sometimes have been referred to sanctions and things like that, but where are these teachable moments? How are we passing along learning opportunities for correction, course correction in their lives or behaviors? What traditional teachings can we call on to really make those things a reality in the Healing to Wellness Court, make them authentic again to our community? Respectful communication. Again, really treating each other as good relatives in the ways that we're communicating with participants, their families, the community, the court. How are we having that mutual exchange that really speaks to ways that we would traditionally interact with one another, keeping and telling stories, following the journeys of those that are involved, and how we can reapply those to future participants, showing the community where we've gone. That could be with our data collection, evaluation, those kinds of things. Enduring knowledge and experience. When I'm thinking of this, I'm thinking of how do we pay it forward, right? So then when we have participants who've been through the program, how do we reincorporate them so that they're passing on the knowledge and transferring, as Grandma Shar would say, in our traditional sense, how are they transferring that knowledge? And then sustaining the team, community, and nation building so that it's a continuous cycle. So we start there and we end there. Just continue that moving forward so that we can further enhance what we do. So again, not new information, just maybe new and different ways to look at and experiencing those pieces within our own communities and reimagining what they might look like. So here we're really focusing on key component number 4, and that's treatment and rehabilitation. So tribal healing to wellness courts provide access to holistic, structured, and phased alcohol and drug abuse treatment and rehabilitation services that incorporate culture and tradition. So that's kind of the very clinical, if you will, or formal description of what the component is. But again, this session is to reimagine what that looks like, applying our culture in a very real, authentic way. So that's what we're going to look at moving forward today through this session. Next slide. And I apologize if you're still having trouble hearing me. I don't know, Anna, if you want to jump in.
We can hear you now. Okay, Tasha.
Okay, perfect. I apologize for that. So culture as a key component, in my view, this may not be the view of all practitioners and TTA providers of juvenile healing to wellness, but culture is the key component when we're looking at that. That's what differentiates these courts from typical youth, drug, and alcohol abuse and misuse courts. It is our culture that is our strength here. And so we do want to have court concepts that are consistent with traditional Native justice concepts and methods. Whatever that looks like in your community or your region, that's what we will be looking at. And we want to focus on the root causes of underlying addictive or abusive behavior that leads to court involvement rather than the act that led us there. And then traditional methods that focus on healing are going to often involve family, extended family, and community in the healing process. So really looking beyond just individual accountability, but us being accountable as communities and families for our youth, as was stated before by Grandma Sharp, really putting them in the center and seeing what we can do to help develop them as good human beings, as good relatives. And for some communities, like she said, that starts with their Indian name, right? That's to our ancestors and to the land. So it can be any number of things working in your juvenile healing to wellness court, but really looking at how these things build upon one another and can flow really authentically through your process and your phases. Next slide. You do want to try to look at a wide range of cultural, traditional, and customary and/or community values and practices or activities that can be incorporated within the phase plan And I would say maybe, looking at how those can be varied by participant, because as we know, youth have different interests and strengths and gifts, and what speaks to them and what is going to connect with them culturally. It can't be a one size fits all. Not to overwhelm the program and the program staff, but offering a variety of things that can be incorporated in the different phases can probably lead to a little bit more success with a variety of youth. And then we want to look at activities that may be diagnostic, healing, cleansing, reparative, restorative, could involve peacemaking or mediation. And there are a variety of other culturally grounded participatory activities to support connections and therapeutic community response. So, oftentimes we talk about walking in two worlds, and I think the Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court is a prime example of where we can weave those two worlds together to maximize how we're supporting our youth. Because I think, teaching them to live in both of these worlds that we have to live in, and recognizing the strengths that they both bring into their lives and the value that they can provide is super important. And then finally, activities in the Juvenile Healing to Wellness that involve culture can also engage spiritual leaders, elders such as Grandma Shar and her husband, educators, and others that support wellness court participants. Really building that community of support outward, like a ripple effect, so starting with individual, family, and expanding outward. The more support, the better. I think we all know that. And just really identifying those human resources, if you will, that exist within our communities that are willing to help bring our youth through these difficult times and journeys that they may be going through when they participate in Juvenile Healing to Wellness courts. Next slide. So here you'll see, by strengthening individuals, Healing to Wellness courts in turn empower families. And so that goes back to the holistic approach that we're talking about, not just the holistic approach to self, but the greater community. Because really, if we're looking long term and thinking broadly, we're looking at healing the community, one person, one family, one youth at a time, and having that ripple effect that I mentioned. And so these are fundamental to Indigenous cosmology and centerpieces of Native societies. We all know this, that our families are key in our healing and our wellness and preparing youth for productive, well lives. And then next, wellness courts are institutions that work to identify and promote the beneficial connections for their participants and encourage long-term connectivity to sources of support. And that really goes to building those communities and those networks of care. Next slide. Right now, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Chanel so that she can speak specifically to some of the work that's been done on the Blackfeet Nation that can definitely be modeled and adapted to your particular community.
Thanks, Tasha. So this is a map of the Blackfeet Nation. We're also known as the Amskapi Pikani Nation. We're one of 4 bands of the Blackfoot Confederacy, and we're the only band located in the United States. The other 3 are actually located in Alberta, Canada. They are the Kainai, Siksika, Northern Blackfoot located in Alberta, Canada. So we're actually right, the Glacier National Park and the Rocky Mountains are like our backyard. We have beautiful, beautiful country here. The Blackfeet Nation is one of the largest tribes in the United States. So there's 17,321 members. Our reservation is 1.5 million acres. It's one of the largest in the United States. So speaking about Glacier National Park, we as Blackfeet people consider ourselves kind of the keepers of the headwaters. We are The Triple Divide is actually located right in our territory. So a lot of hydrologists and geologists, what have you, will consider that like the hydrological apex of North America. So that's something I think is important for us because we're kind of the keepers of the water, and we've always fiercely protected our territory. We were known as the Lords of the Plains to some. But I think just we have a deep connection to our land, and we're actually one of the few tribes who held on to our original territory. We're actually located in part of our original territory. And Charlene, did you have anything you wanted to share about the land?
Yes. Even though the map shows just a small part of where our reservation is now, our actual territory was from upper Alberta all the way almost the entire state of Montana. And so we call that our Nidawaksin, which means it's our homeland. It means it's a place that our spirits connect, and the territory that was given to us to keep and hold sacred and to learn the stories of place. And where in the Western world they have deeds, and when you own a tract of land, it's a deed. But within our worldview, we have stories of place, and where we understand like where our paint comes from, where our bundles come from. When you hold those stories, you know who you are, where you come from, and what your journey of life is about. You know which part you play in the universe, where everything that's within that territory, all of the animals and the birds and the minerals, the solar system, everything, we all work together to hold that place sacred. And so to us, it's an important part of our healing to wellness, because when you transfer this to your children, they are never alone any longer. Even though the journey of life can be difficult, you always have lots of helpers within your, if you know what your stories, your origin stories are.
Next slide, please. Okay, so this photo, it was actually chosen as the logo for the Healing to Wellness courts by a previous coordinator. And I just think it really represents our program's mission. And I'll talk more about what our mission is later. But to me, this photo represents what we're working towards, and that's, it represents the power of a strong cultural identity. And Grandma Shar can kind of talk more about what the significance of this photo represents.
So in the Blackfeet world, we have what we call Gipitapukas, and we have mini pukas. And the mini pukas are kind of the spoiled children, the favorite child, but the Gipitapukas are the ones that are going to carry on knowledge, and they're going to take it to, they're the ones that we transfer roles and responsibilities to. And you begin to know who they are. It's not a one size fits all in our world. It's you begin to tell the children that are learn the stories, learn the songs, learn the ceremonies. They just display leadership qualities, and so they mentor. And so our whole worldview, we have societies, we have children's societies, and sometimes these little kids, like in this picture, little children are already elders, meaning that they've learned what that is, if it's the bumblebee society or if it's the doves, they've learned all the stories and the responsibilities and the connections, and then they can pass it down to the next group of kids coming behind them. It's a real powerful way to connect, and so that you always have lots of elders in your community that will be able to help you in all kinds of different situations you might get yourself into. It's always about restoration. and renewal.
I really like, this is Tasha again, I really liked our conversation about this, Grandma Shar, and again, I appreciate you talking about children who are already elders or younger elders that exist within our communities, because I think that may be an untapped resource. There's lots of respect and reverence that we find for elders, but because of the histories of our people and some of our cultural beliefs, I think it's important to share with everyone, and thank you for doing that, that we do have younger elders among us who have learned from other, from their elders and put in the work that you mentioned, or have been brought into certain societies. So using them as a resource. And then also, when you were talking about the transfer of knowledge and children modeling for other children, Western models are now talking about mentoring, but Blackfeet people and other Indigenous people have been doing that for a long time. So that spoke to me as well. And then what I visualize when you're talking about this transfer is like links in a chain that can't be broken. Once you're transferring this cultural and spiritual knowledge, you're strengthening that for your children, for your community, for your families, and it's really making that chain stronger, or weaving that belt, or however you want to look at it. And so I really love this picture of this little girl with her teepee, really learning how to live life and be an adult. And so I appreciate all of your sharing.
Thank you.
Next slide. So we are housed within the Blackfeet Tribal Court. The Blackfeet Tribal Court has 4 branches: the Criminal and Civil Court, Family Court, Appeals Court, and then of course the Healing to Wellness Courts. They have jurisdiction over civil and criminal matters occurring on the reservation as authorized by the Blackfeet Constitution and tribal federal law. And the Family Court has civil jurisdiction over divorces, custody and child support, emancipation, guardianships, paternity, termination of parental rights and child, domestic and elder abuse violence, as well as certain criminal matters involving juveniles. And then above that is the Court of Appeals, who make decisions of the tribal court, and they hear appeals of decisions of the tribal court and family court. Next slide. The purpose of our program is to produce healthy, productive citizens of our nation, and then really rehabilitating individuals who have come into negative contact with our court system. And then our mission is to address the needs of high-risk youth affected by the devastation of trauma and substance use disorder on the Blackfeet Reservation by providing holistic healing opportunities through Blackfeet cultural healing methods and exposure to elders, physical experiences with our homeland, and access to mental health and SUD treatment. That photo there on the right is actually an article that was in our local newspaper, the Glacier Reporter. And she was a graduate of our Adult Healing to Wellness Court project. And I just want to give a shout out to her, Orlin Devereaux, our Matsuwapistakiaki Pretty Mountain Woman. She's our adult graduate. She's doing awesome. She received her Blackfeet name at her graduation ceremony 2 years ago. She's still doing very, very well. And if you want to check out her graduation, you can go to our Facebook page. Just search Blackfeet Healing to Wellness Court projects and it should pop up. But yeah, that's something that we offered to her, is exposure to some elders in our community that taught her the significance of a name. And she actually went and asked to get the name at her graduation ceremony. So, and she actually even today on Facebook, she even goes by her Blackfoot name instead of her English name. So that was something amazing. Charlene, do you have anything to add to this slide?
Yes, one of the things, like we were talking about, our purpose, our mission, and one of my missions, that I've tried to impart to the coordinator and to the people coming in, is that to remember like Chenille said, we were at one time considered lords of the plains. And then in 1934, when Maslow saw us, he changed his whole, he went from a behavior psychologist into becoming a humanistic psychologist after an encounter with our people. And he said that we were 85% self-actualized. And what I wanted to emphasize is that our own philosophy is what sustained us and made us so strong. And just like the water is still pure here in our homeland, our own philosophy is what sustained us through all the things that have come against Indigenous people. As much as they've tried so hard to disconnect us from everything, we still have that little, those connections that will keep continuing to carry us through one assault after another. And so that's what I wanted to say, is that's what we're trying to do, is introduce them to their strengths. Because so many times it's easy to go through a reservation and see trash or see all the negative things, like to look at the natives like they're have problems with, I mean, all the different problems that we're identified as. And what I like to do is introduce the two people, to all of our own people, who we really are when we're in our own habitat, and the way that life was given to us. We're strong and we're healthy and we're still here. And so that's the mission, and to be able to help these kids find and adults to find their way back to wellness.
Grandma Shar, that's amazing. I think awakening that identity and connection in our youth is exactly what is needed, right? Remind them who we really are. We can make a t-shirt. I love t-shirts. But you know, in really going back to our own philosophies that have sustained us, you know, when you're talking about what people see on the reservation and how they might immediately go to the negatives and not the beauty. I know within the Tribal Youth Resource Center, when we're working with our Juvenile Healing to Wellness Court grantees and our Tribal Youth Program grantees, we really talk about using strength-based language as opposed to deficit-based language, and trying to uplift the resources and the gifts that each community has, rather than focusing on the negative. I mean, we have to acknowledge that those things exist, but how can we flip the script and pivot and look at it through a different paradigm? So thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. You're welcome.
So like I said, we have two programs, the adult and juvenile project. The adult entry criteria is for adults over 18 years old. They have to be willing to be in the program. They have to be an Indian within the jurisdiction of the tribe. Their offense has to be within the jurisdiction of our tribe. They must be considered high risk, high need, be clinically eligible, or have a substance use disorder. And we don't accept, we have the violent offender, serious violent offender limitation with our funding. We are funded by BJA and OJJDP. The core services are, we refer to, of course, SUD treatment, mental health counseling, medical appointments. And then all services are based on the client needs. So we do educational or vocational services. And then our cultural connectedness services, our activities. And then just daily, weekly team support, monitoring, and supervision. And then the only difference between the two programs, the juvenile program, of course, targets the age group between 12 to 21 years old. With this program, parents also have to participate and consent give consent for their child to participate in the program. We do try to, kids that just have status offenses in family court, those are very low risk, low need children. So we try not to accept those. But if a juvenile is a first time offender, we may determine them eligible based on the severity of the offense, and then just the circumstances behind the charge. And then usually there's people in the room that know the child. So we really base our entry of the juvenile program on, it's a little different because juveniles are not at the same level yet necessarily as an adult that's offending. So the circumstances are actually more reviewed with the juvenile entry criteria. So there's a little bit of laxity, I guess, in the juvenile entry process. The core services that are similar to adult services, but they're age appropriate. So our team support and program services really rely strongly with our school partnerships. We partner with the Browning Middle School and Browning High School, as well as the William Buffalo Hyde Academy Alternative High School. And we partner with other communities like the Heart Butte High School and alternative program as well. Next slide. So cultural integration in our programming and daily life is vital to the health of our communities. I hold the guidance and support of our cultural knowledge holders very close to my heart. So that was really important to me to get the culture integrated into our programming, is to ask for guidance and ask these people who are our knowledge holders for their advice, making sure they are a part of the process. So my advisor and my Nasa, Grandma Shar, is my go-to person when I'm feeling disconnected or out of balance. So her knowledge and advice is a huge part of who I am today. So cultural integration, you have to reach out and your answers are within your knowledge holders. So I guess I'll let my Grandma Shar explain the importance of cultural integration in youth serving programs.
Well, so like everything else, we've always had to find ways. In our philosophy, we call it the constant flux. There's always new challenges, new days. Like we're in the age of technology, when once we were in the dog days, once we didn't have any other cultures that were competing with our culture. So now every generation has something new they have to maneuver in, and so what we had was ways to ground ourselves and yet be able to flow with whatever is, how can you go from the days of dog days to the age of technology? Well, you always have to be open, and that part of your brain has to always stay open and able to integrate new tools, just like what we're doing right now with Zoom. We're able to cross international borders, we're able to do new things. And so being able to get this, in the old days, the grandmothers and grandfathers were, one of the most important thing was to get the stories of place, but to get the stories into the children, because that was like your baseline. And from there, you begin to build citizenship from there, so that they understood their connection to the sun, the moon, the stars, everything that's transferring life to us, the earth, the paint that we use for our face, all the strengths that we have. So at one time it was all forbidden or outlawed. And so we had to find ways to always get around that problem and always work towards restoration and renewal. For instance, this time of the year is when we, certain societies are the renewal societies of the spring. and they'll be getting we call them the thunder bundles. They'll all begin to open, and people will begin to go and get their faces painted. But in those societies is where you're learning the transfer, what we would call a dance between different kingdoms, like the minerals and the animals and the solar system, how they're all part of our educational system. And so we don't have that. They're sources of power, and that's what we give to these people that come into these programs, is this ability to restore themselves to the community, to their families, the ability to restore themselves with the universe. And so there's always hope.
Yeah, and when we were discussing this, Grandma Shar talked about how, you know, before colonization, we were, our kids were at an early age, it was imprinted, or they were growing up with all the songs and the transfers and the songs. So when that was all forbidden, that process was, it was severed. That connection with our culture was severed. So that's what we're working for in this program, is entering that relationship again with our culture, and removing the barrier there that a lot of our people have. And we do that with our, we have our own healthcare system of our traditional healthcare system that we can reach to. Okay, next slide. I think this is where Anna was going to jump in.
Hi, thank you. Can you all hear me? So I know that when we were preparing for this session, we had a discussion about how you all as a community were coming together and looking at ways to develop and enhance the ways that services were implemented for those individuals that were coming into the court. And I think one of the aspects of your court is the processes that you all moved through as a community. And one of those was the implementation of the community readiness assessment. And so we just wanted to share a little bit with our participants today about the community readiness process and what that entails. And then I think you all were going to walk through some of the ways that you all implemented that process and what the outcomes were. And so we have linked to the community readiness assessment tool. This is a process to engage with your community and see how ready the community is to address certain aspects of an issue that you all see within the community itself, and then to resolve some outcomes with that core planning group. And so there's a survey process that's involved with the community readiness assessment, and then there are outcomes that can be implemented within the community based on the findings. And there's actually a handbook that's available. And several years back, we actually had the opportunity to do a training with some of the developers of the CRA process. So just to invite you all, if you're interested in learning more specifics about community readiness assessments and the process itself, you can actually visit our YouTube channel, and I will put that in our chat. But I believe it was Dr. Pamela Jumper-Thurman and Barbara Plusted had done some trainings with us. And so we actually have those videos archived as well, if you're interested in learning more about the process itself. But I'll let you, Chanel, share just about some of the early steps involved with your own community readiness assessment. And then I'm going to link in the chat some of the things that I just talked about.
Yeah, so I think just really involving your community in the early stages of planning is really, really important to just getting buy-in for your program, and also just bringing awareness of what the Healing to Wellness Court model is. But just developing your program with your community's help will help your program become holistic because you're involving key people in the community. So the answers are there within your community. And how we did that was we established a community advisory circle. The advisory circle is 12 members. They're key people in the community that are directors of organizations that are key stakeholders, I guess. So just involving them in the entire process, and also working with your grant funded. OJJDP has technical assistance providers. We were lucky enough to get a technical assistance provider that's from our community, Dr. Paulette Runningwolf. So she helped us with this entire process. She presented the community readiness model to our community, and then walked us through the entire process. But it was just, I guess, reaching out to your helpers in your community. Like Grandma Shar said, there's people here who hold this knowledge, and reaching out to people who are available to you. Not just thinking you have to do everything on, by yourself. You have people there ready to walk you through these processes. So the community readiness model is survey questions. There's 5 dimensions. You yourselves score the surveys. I think we interviewed 10 community members in the process, but we actually we thought of the issue together as a community advisory circle. And I think the issue that we all came up with was the effects of trauma, and I think dealing with the effects of trauma, including substance use disorder. So trauma was really our focus. So next slide. So this was the process. We interviewed and conducted surveys with individuals. Like our whole community advisory circle helped with this process. Each of them we developed the list of people who we thought we should interview together. And each of us took maybe 2 people and interviewed them. And then came together, scored the interviews. And then just based off of what we found in the surveys, the scores, we then started developing. We found that there's a huge desire for cultural specific programming, and people thought there was just not enough of that in our community. So that's where we started with this cultural component piece. And we all together thought of maybe, hey, we could have a forum and invite all of our cultural knowledge holders, our advisors, and get their input on what cultural integration into our programs would look like. So we brought them all together, hosted, I think, 4 forums, reviewed the findings of this community readiness assessment process, and then just kind of developed a series of modules. So we have cultural modules that will be offered to all of our participants. And these modules were the result of this whole process. So our community knowledge holders helped us identify, I think what we asked is, what would a strong identity look like? What do these children need to know? What is the basic teachings that they can be taught while they're with us in this program to help them connect more to develop cultural connectedness? Grandma, do you have anything to add in that?
Chanel, wondering if you can share with the relatives here, some of the demographics of the people that you interviewed, like how did you choose who you were going to interview? What role did the youth play in determining, those needs? And then also, is your advisory circle still meeting to reevaluate or anything like that?
Sure. So the demographics of the people that we interviewed, I think Dr. Running Wolf asked us to come up with, I think the list was like 20 people, and we prioritized the list into 10, but it's just people in the community who work a lot, like major stakeholders with the youth. So it was a lot of the school, like our superintendent of our schools. There were people that work in the medical field. There were people that are working in our college, just a lot of educational professionals. And then there were also people that are just community members, leaders in the community. There were people that, let's see, I'm trying to think of who was all in the interview pool. A lot of people that are in the treatment field. So the director of our treatment program, Crystal Creek, was one of them, a tribal health director, and then I think a councilman was even one of the people we interviewed. And then what were the other things you wanted me to share?
Just if there were youth involved in those interviews, were there any youth that were interviewed? And then is your community advisory circle still meeting? Is it still functioning?
Yeah, we are still meeting. COVID kind of prevented a lot of the this cultural component. So a lot of this, because we weren't able to meet with our elders and get them in to come teach the modules, our community advisory circle is involved a lot with this process. So no, we didn't meet during COVID, but we are going to get this going soon. And then youth, we did involve a lot of our participants in the forums. So there were kids that attended the forums, and a lot of our participants helped serve the elders. So we invited them and their families. They came and helped do the sign-ins and sat and listened to the discussions, but just asking them, they weren't involved in the interviews. We didn't interview youth, but we did involve them in the forum process. That's a good
Thank
idea.
you. I just wanted to make sure that we're sharing that with everyone here, just for ideas on who they might include and what worked for you and what worked for your community for brainstorming.
They also attended the beginning. We brought in kids from our immersion programs in the first forum. So they were actually able to all come in and share, pray for us, and speak the language for our elders. And we sat them right in the middle of the room. We set the room up like a teepee. And then the protocol, all the teepee protocol was there, and the little kids got to sit in the middle and serve our elders. But yeah, they were involved. They just weren't necessarily involved in this community readiness process. Okay, I think we can move to the next slide. Oh yeah, Wendy just reminded me that they did participate in the table discussions, and their families did too. So when we had the last forum, we had tables, little stations, and they were able to move through each table and give each table kind of their ideas.
This is Anna. We have a question in the pod, and then I know I didn't know if Grandma Charlene had anything to say about the CRA process before we asked that question.
Okay, the question is there any collaboration between the Blackfeet Nation courts and courts of the Blood Reserve First Nations and standoff? We don't have any collaboration yet. That is something we were talking about. We do have a lot of elders who come across the line and meet with us. That was something we were talking about. I know there's a problem-solving court in the Blood Reserve, so right now we're not collaborating with them. At this time, we're not. We did actually have a court, a restorative justice program from Canada come across and observe our court, the Big Stone Recovery, I think is what their name is. But yeah, they've heard about us, and that's something we're going to look forward to, is collaborating with our people from across the line.
And then we have one more question, which might be answered next, but it was about going over examples of your cultural modules. And I think we're going to actually talk about that a little bit coming up on the next slide.
Yep.
If I can just say, the only thing I wanted to add is that you, the concept of Indian time is sometimes put out there like it's a negative thing. But in our worldview, you know when your community is ready for different steps of, first of all, your council has to be in step with you. And when all things come together and it's time to move to the next step, because your people are ready for it. We have a thing that we do with our elders when we're ready to receive their knowledge. We swipe their aura and bring it to our hearts. And so when your community begins to embrace, the families themselves will begin to embrace it as their kids go through this program and through the modules. You'll see that they begin to embrace this method that we have for restorative justice.
Thank you, Grandma. So I liked how Tasha earlier talked about living in two worlds. So the cultural connectedness modules, examples of those, there's, I think, 13 of them. I don't have them in front of me, but there's like a process of what our elders and our people decided identity, the beginning of their identity should look like, and what they would need to know. So examples are, there will be like a module taught where they learn the importance of their name, their Blackfoot name, how to get a name, how to ask for a name, how to call your name, how to, there's different, just the naming ceremony process. They'll be taught all of that. And another example is even taking them, we thought, kids don't like to just sit in classrooms. They're not. They learn by experience. So a lot of these modules are experiential. So some of them will bring them to right there where it says sample items. I'll talk about the cultural connectedness scale soon, but I kind of wanted to talk more about what the modules are. Some of them are bringing them to our sacred sites on our reservation. So showing them, telling them creation stories, and then showing them where on their land these creation stories are coming from. So connecting them to place, connecting them to their community. And then other examples are like songs, learning the songs of different societies, learning what the youth societies are, and then bringing in kids that are a part of these societies so that they can see it in action. So that's just some examples. If anybody would like to see our modules, they're just brief descriptions. Every I guess, knowledge holder, cultural elder in our community will kind of have a different idea of how to teach each of these. So we made the description pretty brief, and each consultant or cultural advisor that comes in, that there will be a male and a female that teach each session, because male and female roles are so different, and they complement each other in our community, so or in our culture. So making sure both of those are represented in each module are really important. So that's kind of a lot of our modules fit like spirituality and customs, language. So when I think of culture, I think of all of that. It's kind of a broad term, but measuring these modules was something that we need to do. So living in two worlds, I guess, and then just giving and allowing space for people to understand what's important in our world. So using something like this, the cultural connectedness scale, we'll talk more about that on the next slide, but it was adapted to fit our culture, and it's a tool, we do it in a pre and post survey. We give it to each participant. So hopefully by the end of the modules, their cultural connectedness score, or it will increase. And those are just examples of the scale items. So we'll ask like a Likert scale is how it's scored, but we'll ask, my community believes I'm important, and then it will say like 1 to 5, like score it 1 to 5. How much do you believe your community believes you're important? And what we found, we did get to score a lot of our participants, their pre-surveys. So most of their scores are very, very low. Most of our kids have no knowledge of they have no connection to their culture. So this is a way of measuring healthiness. So culture, I guess it's important to define cultural connectedness. So culture is, the way of life, general customs and beliefs of a particular group of people. That's the dictionary definition. And then when I think of culture, I think of spirituality, customs, traditions, art, music, dance, history. Most importantly, the language. So connectedness is the feeling of belonging, or being or feeling socially, emotionally, or spiritually attached to others in our community. And cultural connectedness, so from those two definitions, is the concept of fostering that linkage to those areas that each person is drawn to. And when I say each person, not everybody's going to connect in to each of these modules. They might not connect to, so having a variety of activities that represent each part of that culture, that gives each of these kids that opportunity to respond or be drawn to. And then, so a lot of the studies done on the cultural connectedness scale, they have shown that positive health outcomes for Indigenous youth are consistently related to feelings of being connected to our culture. And then I think Grandma Shar, you had something you wanted to add in this.
Yes, I was going to say that there's different measures, like for instance, in culture, the way that we would assess whether our business, for instance, our business of our supper club, the way that we measure success is not the same as they do in the rest of the world, because our success is like, were we able to help our family? Were we able to, in our supper club, our children and our grandchildren all worked in there. We had a timeline story that was the story of the Blackfeet that was all around the entire building, which is a huge building, like a lodge. And they were able to tell our stories. They were able to tell our guests that came from all over the world who we are. And so it isn't how much money we put into the bank. It was, were we be able to use our business to help our family and to share our culture. So that would be my measurement of success. So when you're talking about assessment, it's really, really hard to try to put one thing there because everybody has a different way that they measure success. And so now our grandchildren are getting ready to take over the restaurant and we have a male and a female model there that are going to take the same roles that my husband and I did. And so our measure of success will be, are they able to do it and do the same thing?
Thank you, Grandma. Okay, next slide. So really quickly, we're running out of time. The cultural connectedness scale is an indigenous or native developed scale. It's 29 items. It's measured in dimensions. So identity, traditions, and spirituality are the 3 dimensions that are measured with this scale. The link, I believe they'll provide that, Anna. But it's just Indigenous quantitative methodological framework. Community and strength-based approaches are the core of the framework. And then culture is an important determinant of health. So research is showing that culture is a strong protective factor, and it allows us to, this is allowing us to measure the efficacy of our culture and our culture as treatment for mental health and SUD. So this can be adapted to fit your communities, and it's important to adapt it to your community. Adaption's key. So measuring your cultural connectedness in your community that uses your own local concepts. Next slide.
I just wanted to share quickly, Chanel, that when we were preparing for this session, you all talked about how you had taken that scale and really tried to ensure that you were adopting it specifically for your community. And so I just wanted to note that Chanel's contact information will be available later if you wanted to reach out and talk to her more specifically about that adaptation process.
Yep. Yeah, I think, yeah, we can also provide any of our modules. If you guys have questions, feel free to reach out. So just, I guess, talking to end, just being able to quantify, I guess, our culture and making sure we're able to measure those and conceptualize cultural connectedness, and allowing us to explore the role our culture can play in enhancing our health and our wellness of our Indigenous youth. And then also being able to share this with your community and share there's a lot of fear that comes with our culture because a lot of that comes from the boarding school era. So that fear of our culture still exists in our community. So being able to have data, and our data collection specialist is actually collecting this data now, but being able to share those results and how effective this program is going to be really exciting, and I'm excited to get this going.
Thank you so much, Chanel, and thank you so much to Grandma Charlene. Tasha, I don't know if you had any closing thoughts or words. Want to make sure you're connected.
Sure, yeah, I'm connected again. I apologize, everyone. No, I just really appreciate, Chanel and Grandma Char sharing. I wish we had more time for questions. I know there's a question in the chat asking if Blackfeet are matrilineal, but I didn't see any other questions. But we can definitely follow up. Chanel's contact information will be there. My contact information, of course, Anna's available as well. So I will go ahead and move through just out of respect for everyone's time and the other sessions. Next slide, Laura. just showing our team here. Thank you to everyone who worked on this project as far as getting the session ready. Our mission is envisioning a future where Indigenous youth thrive through traditional lifeways. And looks like we do have time to answer the question. Looks like Chanel answered it in the chat. Thank you, Chanel. Next slide. And here is the contact information for the Tribal Youth Resource Center, housed at TLPI, and then my direct contact information as well. And as you can see, our grant information below for our cooperative agreement. And I'll turn it back over to Anna.
Thank you so much. And I don't know if Chanel or Grandma Charlene, any final closing words, and then I can give our final announcements.
Just thank you for letting us share, and I appreciate everybody that attended, and hope you all have a good day and rest of your week. And good luck in development of your programs for those of you who are in that stage.
And I want to say thank you to everybody who participated, and we'll continue to smudge and pray that your communities can find their own methods of wellness restoration.
Thank you so much. I know our participants are grateful for your time, for your sharing of wisdom, and for your willingness to be a part of this conference. And so just want to say a big thank you from our team to both of you, and for all the work that you're doing, and moreover, just your commitment and passion for your community and for wellness in general. So thank you so much for the presentation today. And I wish we were in person. We'd probably just sit here all day with you all. So thank you again, and we'll see you again next time, hopefully in person. So thank you very much. We're going to close with some announcements for you all. There is an evaluation. We'll put the link in the chat. And so if you could complete the evaluation, it is very helpful for us. It helps us to plan future trainings, and also gives us good feedback for the sessions that we are providing. So we appreciate your time. If you are able to complete the evaluation, we would greatly appreciate it. I am putting the link in the chat now. As a reminder, there are 2 additional workshops that will be held later today. In the family track, we will have workshop C3, How Your Healing to Wellness Court is a family-focused court, and you might not even know it, and how to improve recovery outcomes for the entire family. In the general track, there is a session C4, Culture is Our Best Protective Factor in Healing Practice. To join the workshops, please go back into the virtual lobby, enter the enhancement training door to join B3 or B4. Please note these workshops will start in 1 hour. So again, we would invite you to stretch and take a break, have lunch, visit the resource center and the wellness spaces in our virtual platform, and have a good rest of your day. Thank you so much for being here. We appreciate all of you and all the work that you're doing. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.